Thank you all very much. And I think we have our first question from CNN. And if not, then we'll move on to others. Okay. Any questions from somebody other than CNN? Go ahead.
Can you talk a bit about some of the tactics or mechanics that you plan to use in order to, when you do push back on the Trump administration and also the Republican majority?
Ask them to identify themselves.
Yeah. And will you let everybody know which alley you're from? I know, but they don't.
I can try, but the text is true.
Yeah. Thank you, Matthew. We know that House Republicans have an extremely thin majority. And so our goal will be not only to have the Progressive Caucus try to block Trump's tax break handouts to his billionaire friends, but our goal will be to hold the entire Democratic caucus together because the Progressive Caucus cannot get out there first and organize all of our Democratic colleagues to unanimously oppose those billionaire tax breaks, for example. And then it'll be up to the Republicans to either vote unanimously to give billionaires a tax break when they said they were the party of working people and pay the political cost for it, or we can sink those billionaire tax breaks. But either way, I think our job will be to not only unify our caucus, but unify the Democratic caucus around what working people actually want. Go ahead.
Thank you. Michael Jones, Once Upon a Hill. So much of the work that you were able to do in the 117th and 18th Congress was through the executive action agenda that y'all put forward. Obviously, that was working with the Democratic president. You will be answering with the unified Republican government. How are you going to find ways to enact some of those policy provisions that may be outside of the legislative process that you all were able to do through the executive branch with Trump 2.0?
We'll be working hard to protect many of the executive action victories we had under the Biden administration because the Progressive Caucus executive action agenda was a popular agenda, making sure that workers don't get screwed out of their overtime pay, changing our student debt system so that people aren't ultimately paying, for decades student debt that they should have already been able to pay off. And so we'll be raising our voices and making it very difficult for the Trump administration to undo many of our wins. If you look at during the last Trump administration, there were battles we fought and battles that Democrats fought both in D.C. and across the country that we won by, for example, saving the Affordable Care Act, and then battles that it may look like we lost, for example, when the Trump tax scam was passed. But if you look at Trump's approval ratings during his first term, his approval ratings went into the toilet when he passed the tax scam. That wasn't just because it was a billionaire handout, but it was because members of Congress worked with community groups to really make sure that the country knew what Trump was really up to, because we can expect that Trump will keep on saying he's doing one thing and then do the exact opposite when he's in office. Go ahead.
We've seen
and will you tell us, both yourself ignorant?
Ryan Schmelz, Fox News Radio.
Yeah.
We've seen some Democrats express interest in working with DOGE on ways to cut government waste or make government more effective. Do you see places that you can work with DOGE to make government more efficient?
Well, progressives have always been for efficient use of our tax dollars. Unfortunately, Elon Musk has largely proven himself to be an efficient liar and self-serving plutocrat. And so I don't have high hopes for him having anything other than pretty awful ideas. But progressives are always willing to vote for and champion good ideas. Many of us here have amendments and bills, for example, for making sure that our defense budget is appropriate and rerouted to make sure that it's actually, make sure that the Pentagon someday could pass an audit, make sure that we actually invest in our communities instead of needless war. But I, at least speaking for myself, having experience with Elon Musk in Texas, is that he tends to talk a lot, but he doesn't really seem to know very much. Go ahead.
Charles Hillier with Dispatch. Could you speak a little more about your diagnosis as to why Democrats had such an underwhelming performance in the elections last month?
Of course, we can make sure we take a look eventually at, all of the, when the voter file fully comes out, we'll make sure we go and take a really deep dive. But broadly, you might come and think, if you went to the election of the centrist caucus election, for them to say we need to run more center, that you come to the progressive caucus chair and see, maybe I come and say we need to be more progressive. But to be honest, right, people could point to centrist members of Congress that ran ahead of the vice president. But you could also point to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's election, my own election, where we also ran ahead of the vice president. So I'm not here to argue that we necessarily need to run left or right, but rather that we need to run right at the issues of working people. That working people, everyday people, want to hear from leaders that actually motivate them to get to the polls in the first place. And second, many of the voters that I've spoken to in places like Texas that swap their votes from Biden to Trump, or were considering doing so, is because they want to hear from a more authentic Democratic Party that isn't beholden to any other interest other than working people's interests. And I think that has less to do with any particular candidate and more to do with the definition of who we are as Democrats. And I think the Progressive Caucus has been working for a really long time, and we'll triple down our efforts right now to make the Democratic Party connect with working class voters first. Go ahead.
Hi. Rena Diamante with Forbes News. Can you just speak to, I think I've heard you say that it's important to not necessarily campaign an arm's length away from where the American people are currently at. Can you just clarify what you mean by that? And then second, what does your experience with working and organizing in Texas, how does that prepare you for the incoming administration and the Republican majority?
I'll take the second part first. In the last Trump administration, Governor Abbott worked with the Trump administration to threaten to withhold dollars that we needed for people's health care and for people's streets if local governments didn't work to divert their own dollars away from public safety over towards things like deportation of innocent immigrant families. And so we could expect those tactics and worse. And so I know how bad the Trump administration can really be on issues of public safety, on issues of healthcare, and how they try to coerce local governments into also doing the wrong thing. And so I've seen this before, and we're prepared this time to tackle it in round two. To your first question about making sure that we're leading, but making sure that we stay connected with our communities, I think it's so important to make sure that the Democratic Party holds people across ideology, holds on to the center of this country without leaving people behind. And there's a real way that I think it is that we can where we can do that. We don't have to. We have to make sure that we lean in on, as a party, those issues like the progressive issues on the economy, where we have 70 and 80% of voters agreeing with us. We should be able to try to persuade people and move people on issues where maybe we don't have 50% support in the country yet, and instead work on that kind of persuasion and bringing people along. Look at the issue of gay marriage, for example. Right? Barack Obama, in his first election for president, wouldn't come out, for example, for gay marriage, but the Democrats worked on moving the country on that issue so that at this point it is overwhelmingly popular. So I think we need to be able to differentiate, honestly, between those issues where we have the overwhelming majority of the country with us, and we should fully lean in on those issues, and then those issues where Republicans have dominated the narrative on things like the right to asylum, and we need to build our own narrative and recognize that we've got to move people fully back into our camp on issues like immigration if we ever want to get to a comprehensive and humane immigration solution. All right. Thank you guys very much. Oh, I think we're going to take one last picture now. Oh. That's with Pramila.